Hello, little darlings. What is up? Welcome to Roots Refuge Farm. I'm in my greenhouse. I had a completely different plan for the video I was going to shoot today, but it's extremely windy outside. You may be able to hear the wind even blowing up against the greenhouse. It's kind of howling through here occasionally. And I realized very quickly there was no content that was going to happen out on the farm. So I ended up scrapping it, taking my kids to the library. And while I was there, I was reading comments on the channel, and I read a comment that got my wheels turning. On my way home, kind of debated on making this video, and I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. I think this is a good conversation to be had. I'm not someone who greatly values like ranting. I've been making videos here on the YouTube for the last 5 years. I take very seriously the idea of lending refuge to people, turn videos on, walk you around my garden, show you the chickens and the cows and what we're making for dinner. What I'm ultimately the most passionate about is sharing a seat at our table in such a way that may inspire you to also seek out creating a refuge in your world and seek out a simpler life. And if I can do anything to help you along that way, that's really what I want to do, because ultimately I feel like that's why I have this platform. This beautiful homesteading life is very worthy. And I think the best way you can do that is just showing the beauty of it and the passion that I feel for it. However, occasionally, you know, I mean, I have opinions, I'm a person, and it's fine. We're all allowed to have those. And I know that talking about this particular topic that I am going to dive into today, I get very passionate about it, and this may seem ranty. It may even seem defensive, and I don't like to be defensive, but I've really thought it over, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna make this video. I'm gonna talk about this because I am very passionate about this, and I think that this may be something that does help people along the worthy journey of food security, food sustainability, and a simpler life. I am a very passionate speaker, and the more passionate I feel about something, the more animated I get to talk with my hands, get kind of loud and wordy. So I made a video yesterday, just threw it up. It was really impromptu, just kind of showing some of the food that I was making. And I used a term called the food that I was cooking, real food. And I mentioned in passing, well, you know, I've had some people that take issue with that terminology. Recently I did a podcast talking about food, and I mentioned real food. And then in comes that qualifier of, yeah, I've had some people, and what I mean by it is blah, 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 blah. I actually have t-shirts coming out next week, new merch that we came up with. It says eat real food right on the top of it. And the last handful of times I have said real food, I've had this I guess argument, or it hasn't even always come as an argument. I want to be very fair. Some of the commenters have come and said, hey, I really want to educate you in your language here with compassion and kindness. So I that's where I definitely don't want to come off as being like me versus them, what I think versus what they think. We are all living a life in our first person narrative, and our lens is crafted from our own experiences and what we've learned and what we see. And while yes, we should remain teachable and open to learn things from other people who have a different lens and life experience than us, we also are going to disagree on things. And I've said this many times before, if you need people to think like you and be like you in order for you to love them, you don't love people, you love yourself. And I don't want to be that kind of person. And sometimes I think I kind of err too much on the side of valuing other people's opinions, that I don't let myself boldly have an opinion. And I don't think that that's healthy either, because if I can't share what I think and how I feel about something, I'm never actually going to feel chosen by people, because I'm just giving them what they want to have in order to be chosen. That's not healthy either. So that's something that I've really dealt with in my life. And that's why when I feel kind of like the urge to make a video like this, and I wrestle it out of like, should I really do that? I kind of settle on, yeah, I think I should. So I have to tell you, I have had like a pretty crunchy hippie mama friend group for a while now, since my teenagers were really little, and never ever in that group is the phrase real food contended. And then I've had a lot of experience with people who are not into like holistic living and growing food or sourcing it and all the different things. I guess what you would call people who are in mainstream, and maybe even people who are in the health world, but not necessarily in the sense of trying to eat whole foods, but eating different diet foods and stuff like that. And the term real food has never been an issue in those circles in my experience either. However, a few years ago, I had posted something on my personal Facebook page about how I have my kids at a basketball game. I don't even remember what it was that I shared, but everybody there was eating, nacho cheese and Gatorade and candy and cotton candy and all the kind of foods that happen at sports games and stuff like that. And I'd said something to my kids about real food. We'll get some real food when we leave here. They had said something funny in response. I don't even remember what it was, but I had a person come on and comment about how arrogant and entitled I sounded, calling, my idea of good food real and other food fake. And it just completely took me by surprise. I was like, whoa, really? Like, I had no clue that this was coming into the world of being something considered like politically incorrect or taboo or marginalizing or anything like that. And I just kind of dismissed it because frankly, that individual that made that comment is a person who's always offended about something. And when a person is like that, I tend to dismiss them because they're never pleased. Like, you can't please them anyway, so whatever. I just usually dismiss them. So I didn't think anything about it. Well, carry on. This platform grows. And we created a t-shirt some years ago that says real food comes dirty. And basically this came with sharing how when I first started growing food, I was actually a little bit freaked out by all the insects that happen in the garden. Naturally so. I mean, I was raised in suburbia, just eating the typical American diet. You go in the grocery store, you see lots of fruits and vegetables that look alike, that are packaged, they're clean. I think one time I bought a bunch of like organic celery or something like that at the grocery store, and there was a dead grasshopper in it. I mean, this is years ago before I was a gardener. I freaked out. Why? Because I just thought like typical Americans do who source their food in sterile grocery stores. Like, I thought that food shouldn't have bugs on it. And then I start growing a garden, and at first I did not garden organically because I thought food shouldn't have bugs on it. And then I realized that I should be more concerned about the poison on my kale than a few holes in the leaves of my kale. I was spreading, powders on my garden and spraying them down, things like 7 Dust and stuff that kills the insects on contact typically. But my kids would come in my garden many years ago when my teenagers were small, and I'd be like, no, don't eat that. We have to wash it off first. And I just thought that was normal because that was my experience of gardening. And I ended up kind of coming into organic gardening later and realizing the great value of building an ecosystem in your garden where things are living in symbiosis with each other. And now it is my great joy that people can come in my garden and just eat cherry tomatoes while they walk through, and my kids come in and just eat their way through my garden. And that is where the shirt came from, real food comes dirty. That connection happened in my mind and gave me a ton of freedom to just deal with that fact and eat food that I knew was as healthy as possible for my body because I grew it. And when we first brought that shirt out, I started to get occasionally a message of somebody saying, hey, that's very marginalizing. Here's why. Yeah, and I have along the way just been like, I don't know that you really understand what I mean when I say real food comes dirty. Well, recently, within the last handful of months, I've been talking more about cooking from scratch because right now food prices are going through the roof and people are really struggling with their grocery budget. And they're talking to me about this. They're talking to me about gardening. I raise food. We keep chickens. We have dairy animals. We raise meat. And I'm getting a lot of feedback. I have a large platform within the genre of food, and so I'm getting a lot of feedback from people, and I want to respond in a way that helps them. So I'm talking a lot about cooking from scratch, because that is a very effective way to economically handle your food needs. Cook from scratch, cook from ingredients, because convenience foods are often way more expensive than a counterpart in raw ingredients would be. The issue is that a lot of people don't know how to cook, and they are then dependent on the convenience foods. And it is true that when you first get started in cooking from scratch, you know, there's some investment. You have to have the tools. And then on top of that, you know, you have to buy different ingredients that once you have them, they're going to last you a long time when you just need a little bit here and there. But for people who have never ever cooked from scratch, it can be overwhelming to come into that and learn all of those things and feel like, oh, this is a mountain I have to get over. Now, my belief and why I've been making that content is because just because it's overwhelming doesn't mean they shouldn't do it. That it would not be more beneficial to them in the long run to go ahead and say, okay, well, how do I budget in, you know, a pan? How do I budget in a knife? How do I get the tools that I need? What can I buy secondhand? What's actually necessary here? And how can I learn to do these things? Because ultimately, even though it may be overwhelming, years from now, especially if we are looking at a trajectory of increased inflation, it will be extremely beneficial for people to go ahead and get over that overwhelm and learn what they need to learn so that they can be empowered by the skills to cook from scratch. That's why I've been talking about it. I think it's very important right now. And I use the term real food. So this comment came through today, and this is the first time I've ever done this before, that I have actually read off from a comment that was challenging with my response publicly. I do feel like this is a little unfair of me. And I'm saying this not because I don't feel like I should do it, but many of you obviously agree with me, and I do not want to gang up on anybody, is why I'm trying to say, please, let's not be nasty. I just want to address what this person is saying this way, because I don't want to have this conversation. What I actually want to do is I just want to teach people how to cook and grow food. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I've been trying to do. And the reason that I feel the need to address it is because people are continually saying, hey, there's an issue with your language and it needs to change. And my language is very intentional. And I'm going to keep using my language. And I say that with all humility, that I am speaking the language that I believe is true and right. And I want to tell you why. I'm okay with disagreeing, but I am also entitled to an opinion and a thought on something. So basically, a person basically said, I want to offer you some perspective on this idea of real food. And this message is very kind. It wasn't, she was very affirming, said, you know, the work you're doing is helpful and important. You know, you have a lot of wisdom. But it's, and this was the thing, it's also vitally important to continue to check ourselves and ensure the language we use isn't marginalizing. So the argument with the idea of real food and using that language that has been presented to me many times now is the idea that the counter of real food is fake food. And then that basically, is it bad to consume these foods that I am insinuating are fake foods, even if the alternative is inaccessible? Okay. And the solution that's most often presented is to call food nutritious or healthful. Even healthful is something that people take issue with, but nutritious, like more nutritious. And I actually agree that food is not good or bad. It is either nutritious or not nutritious. I think that when we heap shame on things, that it can keep people in a place that is negative. Now, the reason why I continually use the term real food, that I have stood by it, and though I have been qualifying that because of these arguments, I want to stop qualifying and I want to just use it. Because I think right now and I'm American, I'm born and raised here in the United States. I've lived in the southern United States my entire life. I don't know how it is everywhere, and I have read different things about different countries and the different ingredients that have been banned there and the different growing practices that have been banned there that are actually being currently used here in the United States. But so when I say we and us and I talk about the system, I am specifically speaking of the American food and agricultural system, but I don't know where it applies elsewhere. But we are currently in a system that is extremely broken when it comes to food. And the problem that I have is that when a person like me, who has a little bit of a platform, not a lot, like, yeah, you know, you think, wow, well, 100,000 people could watch a video. Like, yeah, that's a lot of people, but in the grand scheme of things, this is not a huge platform. But with a little bit of a platform, when I stand up and I start talking about real food, and I'm using kind of a provocative term here that might make people think, wait a second, if that's real, this is fake, what does that mean? I'm very much doing that on purpose because I believe that many people are living in this broken system, consuming what they've always consumed and doing what they've always known to do without actually knowing at all how very detrimental it is to them. And I do not think that it is healthy for me to continually make videos saying, that's detrimental to you, that's detrimental to you, that's detrimental to you. Because I myself have been in my own process of coming out of consuming those detrimental things. It is very, very hard to change mindsets that have been ingrained in you your entire life. It is very, very hard to just decide to live in a way that's countercultural. I think that it is very ineffective to try to constantly say to people, live in a way that's countercultural. That is so bad for you. Do this 180. Do this complete change. Stop everything. Making it black and white, because that doesn't give any consideration to the fact that there are processes involved in mindset changes. And for me, I look at my journey, which has been about 15 years now of really realizing, man, there's stuff in our food that I think is really not great for us, to where I am now, where I eat a mostly nutritious, nourishing diet, where I'm very mindful of the things that I eat, where I really hold some hard standards regarding what I'm willing to eat. And even still, there is this measure of walking that line between what you feel like is the best and then also giving some fringe to being culturally accepted. I mentioned the other day, my kid goes to baseball. He comes home with a Gatorade in his hand every single time. There are things like that that I have to choose my battles and decide what hill am I willing to die on this. I had kind of let there be margin for, well, we mostly stick to eating nourishing foods that mostly taste good. While I want to give room for process learning, people kind of waking up to things on their own, discovering things on their own, because I think that is the most effective way for mindsets to change, is when people become aware of things, they seek the knowledge out themselves, they seek the solutions out themselves. And maybe I do in passing point out a problem. Maybe I do in passing say something that's provocative. Maybe I do, a lot of times unintentionally, because there are convictions that I live by and people are like, wait a second, hold on, you said that you don't eat that or you don't do that. And then I can say, well, this is why. I do that because ultimately, if I'm going to be just completely frank with you about my convictions and my opinions, I live with this underlying sense of absolute rage at the injustice that is currently happening in the world I live in and how people are being handled. I actually believe that we live in a system that is just completely messed up. And I live with this kind of sense of, any point I could step into like indignation that this injustice exists in the world. That people are consuming food that's literally killing them slowly. And sometimes not even that slowly. They're consuming medicine that masks the symptoms. The food is largely being grown in such a way that is hugely damaging the earth, that our children's children are going to have to deal with the decisions that we made, because it lines the pockets of somebody that frankly can afford to eat a heck of a lot better than the people that are suffering from the decisions that they're making. This is something that makes me so angry. And so for the most part, when individuals come and they comment on video, we'll have people coming and like laying into us about eating meat. And I'm like, man, how many nights this week did you lay in bed with a heat pad on your back because your body hurt so bad from how much you were taking responsibility from your food choices? Like, just wondering, how much are you actually putting your life where your mouth is and taking responsibility for the food you eat? Because here in this world and in the homesteading world, this is our life. And usually I don't connect those kinds of comments with the rage that I feel about the injustice of the system. Those are disconnected. The injustice of the system is far beyond something that I can have a one-on-one conversation with a person and change. Until people realize that what they are settling for in their life is so much less than what they could have, they're not going to be able to stand up and demand better. They're not going to be able to stand up and make those choices and opt out of the system that is so broken. And the question that comes up here when we talk about marginalized individuals, you are so right. Minorities and impoverished communities are 100% the biggest victims to this broken system. In fact, if you've never done any reading about food deserts, I implore you to do that. I actually was connected with a young woman on Instagram years ago that lived in a community right outside Washington, D.C., and she actually educated me massively on what a food desert was. They did not have a grocery store where you could buy a piece of fresh produce for 45 minutes in a community where most people do not have vehicles or transportation. They had one small grocery store, I think I remember her telling me, that they took out and put a fast food place in. And what happens in these marginalized communities is often what is offered to them is fast food, Dollar General, markets with packaged food, and that is the only thing that they have access to. And food deserts like that are, to me, such an image of what is wrong with the system at large. Because if you keep people sick, how are they ever going to change the world? How are they ever going to rise up above their circumstances? And I had these long conversations with my friend whenever she was, telling me about the food desert thing, and she was gardening in her very small space. She had a little bit of space, and she was taking the bus to go to DC in order to spend the money that she had on real food for her family. I don't want to make people feel shame if all they have is food that is not nourishing. I do not want them to feel shame if what they have access to is truly inferior nutrition. Because as long as we continue to support the idea that we can't say this is real and this is fake, this is superior and this is inferior, then how can we ever pose the question, why are these people groups only being offered the inferior thing? Why are they only being offered the fake thing? Because that, to me, is where the real outrage is. It's not calling something what it is that's the problem. It's the fact that the system is what it is that is the problem. And then whenever you allow language to mask problems like that, then it brings in all other opportunities for people to stay in gray areas where they don't realize what's going on. For instance, if you go through a fast food chain and you ask for a burger and they say, do you want cheese on that? And you say, yes, I want cheese on that. Did you get cheese on your burger, or did you get vegetable oil? Colored the color of cheese and shaped the shape of a slice of cheese and laid on your burger. Are you eating cheese or are you eating vegetable oil? There's a pretty important distinction in that. If you are going to buy something, shouldn't you know what you're buying? Shouldn't you understand? I did a video recently talking about real food, and I mentioned reading labels and learning to read labels and learning to decipher what is real and what is not really what it's being presented as. What is authentic and what is something that is not what it is being presented as. That's what I mean between real and fake. Is it food? Will it give you calories? Will it keep you alive? I mean, you gotta eat. You can't go more than just a handful of days without eating before you start to see the real effects of that. So yeah, you could eat the vegetable oil cheese product and stay alive. That's true. And some people, that's what they have access to. But if we cannot challenge the language, that's all they'll ever have access to. And to me, the problem comes in, I did that video about eating real food, and the number of people that messaged me after that video, and I hope it's okay that I share this, and this is not with condemnation. I am so proud of you guys for going and reading your food labels and realizing, whoa, what I thought wasn't. I kid you not, over 20 different people messaged me saying that what they thought was butter in their fridge was vegetable oil because they genuinely didn't know. And are these people on a strict food budget? Maybe. And is it alarming when you see the box of butter is $5 and the box of margarine is $2? I don't even know if margarine is $2 anymore. Like, probably more than that now. But it is hard when you are on that budget making those choices. But we have to know, because whenever we're just continually consuming vegetable oils, that is causing heart disease, which has skyrocketed in the last 40 years in our country. Read about this stuff. It was the introduction of seed oils in the 80s and hydrogenated vegetable oils that largely happened in the 80s. It goes hand in hand with the skyrocketing of heart disease. And right now, the number one killer in our country is heart disease. Okay, that's a problem for me. And so the fact that that's allowed to happen, because when people go ask for cheese, they get vegetable oils. Yes, I want to say, is it real cheese? Or is it fake cheese? Because if I know and I make the choice to eat it anyway occasionally, that's one thing. If I know what these things are and I have to look at my grocery budget and I have to decide what's going to make the cut, I can make an educated decision. And maybe I can come into the world of mostly eating nourishing food that's mostly good for me. But if we cannot call a spade, how in the world can we learn how to play the hand that we've been dealt? I see the intention, but as far as the argument that we should not use the term real food, I cannot abide it. I cannot say, you're right, I'll just make this a little bit easier to swallow, because there is this very frustrated place inside of me that I cannot believe that this kind of injustice exists in the world. And I have shared this before. Incidentally, the last time I did a rant video like this, probably about a year ago, because I got contaminated soil, and it just makes me so angry that there are poisons sprayed on the earth that would kill a home garden when a home gardener ends up with it accidentally, and that this system is in place, that this kind of injustice exists. And I will tell you exactly now what I said then. Okay, I believe that one small stone can drop a giant. The analogy I used in that video was that if you had a big shopping mall and you dropped a drop of rain in that, or even a bucket of water, all they would have to do is mop it up. But if you took an Olympic-sized swimming pool and you emptied that into a shopping mall, it could destroy it. I'm not making YouTube content to try to destroy something. What I'm actually trying to do here, whenever I teach you the absolute beauty and joy and fulfillment of the garden, and the actual accessibility of many real food things, maybe not all of them, but many things, and the power that you can gain back drop by drop by drop, what I am really hoping to do is that you could find freedom in your life. That you could find options in your life, and then in turn you would turn around and you would help other people around you find those options in their life. Because I genuinely believe that that system could be completely dismantled in my lifetime. I actually have the faith to believe that. I have prayed that so fervently. I genuinely believe that the injustice that is happening, the fact that people are working their lives away to pay for the insurance to deal with the sickness that they got from eating the food and being exposed to all the toxins, and the whole system that works together, that people are giving their whole lives, not building legacy and building something that is going to be lovely and handed down to their children's children. Instead, what they're doing is they're just trying to survive the madness that we're currently living in. I actually believe that that could change. I actually believe that if enough people would wake up to the importance of finding their own peace and building their own refuge and creating their own seed seeds and collecting their own raindrops, that eventually there might not be food deserts. And yes, there's a lot that goes down this road. You can talk about politics, you can talk about legislation, you can talk about all different kinds of things, but I think giants fall from one small stone. And what I am trying to do here is collect my stone, collect my raindrops, grow my garden, change my diet, change my impact. And the fact that this has happened in my process of doing that leads me to believe that it is important, that it is effective, and the fact that there are now thousands and thousands of gardens being grown simply because this little spot here, it leads me to believe that it is actually possible to destroy that shopping mall. And so I really knew the moment that I decided to make this video that it was going to turn into exactly what it is. I knew I could not possibly talk about this without it going to this place. But the reason why I refuse to stop calling it real food is that until everybody understands what they're being presented as options, until everybody understands that all people should be able to eat food that is nourishing and healthful for them. All people should have access to being able to grow gardens, or at least have connection with gardens that are being grown in their communities. All people should be able to go into a grocery store and know exactly what it is they're buying and have the option to buy things that are nourishing for their family. Until I see the world shift into that, until there's more transparency and labeling and more transparency and higher standards and what is allowed to be sold for humans to put in their body, until that stuff happens, I'm just going to keep making my videos teaching people how to garden, but I am going to keep calling it real food because I feel we deserve something that is authentic and that is what it is presented to be. I hope you can take a breath now, and I hope that this is not something just heaped up on you. If you feel overwhelmed by this and this information, I would encourage you to, yes, pray. I do not think prayer is useless. I know people will bring that argument in. Yeah, we can't only pray, but I am definitely praying over this. Pray and grow your garden. Worry about your piece, your yard, what's in your refrigerator. Look at what you're voting for with your dollar and know that it doesn't have to be black and white. It can be mostly. You are going to have to learn to toe the line between your convictions and the culture. And while, yes, you might be extreme sometimes your kid's going to come home with a Gatorade and no, you shouldn't shame him for it. Like, you have to learn to walk that line. I am a firm believer that if we would just commit ourselves to worrying about ourselves and improving this in our own life and how we engage with the world, that I genuinely believe that it will evoke massive, massive change just in our lifetime. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. I bless you. Until next time.